Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. You're here because this is a new book review. I haven't done a single book review in a while, but Baby Teeth made me need to do a review because I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Couldn't really find anything wrong with it. There's one thing, but we'll get to that later. It blew my mind, and I had to not read for like a few days because I will tell you, you are in two minds. You're in the mind of the mother and in Hannah's mind, who is a, 7-year-old psychopath? Yeah, I mean, it's not the happiest book, okay? It's like, you're not gonna read this to have a great time. I mean, unless you're like into thrillers, like that type of thing, then I guess yes. And I know there's some people out there that do that. The normal-ish person that wants to read for fun, and like you're coming on here to see, oh, what fun things does Nicole recommend? If you're looking for fun, I don't think this is it. It takes something out of you because you are reading about a psychotic child. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand. Okay, my arm's hurting, so it's just gonna be right here. You can see it. I mean, it's far away, but it is what it is. Okay, Baby Teeth. Right, so it follows Hannah, who is, like I said, 7 years old, and she is a psychopath, and she hates her mom. And her mom is the other point of view, and there's also a dad. So it's a 3-family household. The dad is an architect, and they're very privileged. They didn't really have well, the mom did not have the best childhood, which kind of sets her off in the fact that she kind of thinks that she maybe created Hannah to be a psychopath, which from the stuff that she was like doing, or like interacting with Hannah, it's not bad. She's not hitting her. She might yell at her, but that is yelling on very rare occasions because you're so stressed out. That doesn't create a psychopath. And I'm gonna say this up front, she doesn't feel love, she feels obsession. She's obsessed with her dad, and therefore she wants to kill her mom. It's really important. We're seeing two sides. So we know more about Hannah than her parents and her therapist, child therapist that she goes to see. More like in the middle where we see that happening. From what I'm reading, I'm like 30 pages in, I was like, okay, Hannah's a psychopath. She's not even a sociopath, she's a psychopath. She gets frustrated easily, she's violent, she's angered easily, she pre-plans in a very technical, logical way, even for a kid, her plans of attack. She has no remorse. The remorse that she does have is more on the lines of obsession because she wants only to please her dad, and so she'll make like sad faces and stuff in response to her dad, like at the end being really upset with her because she almost killed her mom 3 times. So yeah, someone's gonna be upset if you've tried to kill your mom 3 times. And the therapist is talking to the mom and dad about sending Hannah away. We're reading in the mom's point of view where the therapist is saying that, oh, she has some type of love for dad, so there is some emotion there, so it would be more leaning as like a sociopath. That was in response to the dad saying, okay, well, is Hannah a psychopath? Do we have a psychopath as a child? the therapist said, well, she seems to love you, so it's more like sociopath. I'm gonna say, because we are in Hannah's mind, it is not love, it's obsession, and that's where there's the distinction. And, you know, the author does a really fantastic way of hinting that she's not a sociopath and she's in fact a psychopath, even though the mom and dad and the therapist is leaning towards Hannah being a sociopath. There are there are a lot of reviews on Goodreads mainly, but also on Amazon, where they're saying that children can't be psychopaths, and I don't know where they're getting that from, because I don't know, I think there is like a thing of privilege. Honestly, it's privilege that you have grown up not surrounded or knowing, you don't have to be surrounded, but not knowing one of your fellow peers, or maybe like a cousin or something that has problems, right? I've known people that are psychopaths. They were not kids, they were adults, and it's scary. And if you know what you're looking for, like you know the signs and symptoms, I said signs and symptoms, you know the signs, and you know like the checklist, and you know more background, and even more hardcore like me, hi, you read the DSMs, or like you try and keep up with the DSMs. It changes a lot. Well, not a lot. It changes fairly frequently. Or the latest DSM, they did change the definitions of sociopath and psychopath ever so slightly. So you do have to keep up with that as well. So for the people reading the book and they're like, a child can't be a psychopath, it's unlikely that a child could premeditate killing off her mother who would do that other than like an adult. And they usually don't even say teenager, which also blows my mind, because it's just, I think a lot of people really believe that all children are innocent and naive, and they're not human in a way. Like, and I've also worked with kids, and I've seen some weird stuff going on. Like, there was this one kid, he was about 4 or 5, and I can see him, you know, not wanting to work, learning his ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and he's looking, you know, for a few seconds he looks at his pencil in his hand. And I find this, it's funny, but it's also a little creepy. And there's just an example of kids planning out something. Well, he's looking at his pencil, and then he just turns around and he drops it, and then he turns to me and he says, I don't have a pencil anymore. I can't work. I need to go home. And I'm just like, are you sure about that? Yeah, and then I talked to mom and dad, and there's just, you know, a thing with, not all kids, but a lot of kids, that doesn't mean that he's a psychopath, doesn't mean he's a sociopath. That just means he needs to be taught a little bit more on not lying and not being deceitful. And because I think he picked it up with one of his friends, which is, you know, a lot of the times kids will pick up on bad behavior of parents, family members, and friends that they have in school. So you really have to just, as any parent, really watch your kids. With one of the teachers that has been working with kids for like 30 years that I was also friends with, and this is like a professor, not a teacher, but was a teacher, is a professor. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't know if I'm confusing you all. But, you know, she said she's worked with all age groups, just 'cause she loves teaching. And she says, you know, the younger ones are kind of like little sociopaths, because they're growing and they're learning, but they're really, they really don't understand to the fullest extent of adults, some adults, that their actions affect other people and what is right and wrong, and that it's not always about them. So a lot of the times kids just think about themselves and what they're doing, but then you grow up and you learn that other people matter. Other people's lives matter, and that means you have to really, work more on morals and not lying and, all that stuff. Some kids it's a challenge, other kids, I think they're just born just really compassionate and they just pick it up and they understand, it makes sense. That doesn't mean that the kids that need more time are sociopaths or psychopaths. What is a concern is when, even at and this is something that Hannah does, and at 4 years old, she doesn't want babysitters. So then she realizes that if she attacks enough babysitters, then most likely she's not going to have to deal with babysitters. She's going to either be with, ideally dad, but also with mom, and she'd rather have that. So she attacks babysitters until they give in, and yes, it is a concern. It's a safety concern for everyone, so they do have to give in and no more babysitters, so it's just mom and just dad watching her. But she won, and she understood that violence and premeditating this violence and acting out will upset adults, will freak out adults, and if she wants something, she's going to get it no matter what. And there are a lot of instances, a lot of violent instances where we see that in the book. And maybe it's because I have a few family members that are therapists, different degrees of therapists. Some are really high up, some are just, do talk therapy and whatever. But since I'm in that world because of exposure to therapy and all that jazz, that it would have been a red flag for me, and Hannah should have been in therapy the moment that she ripped out a babysitter's hair and laughed about it. That's not a sign that, you have a psychopath, because they're 4 years old. That's kind of like but still, I think it would have been way more better just to put her in therapy the moment you learned about that, versus we've gotten to age 7 in her obsession with wanting to be with daddy, and she's at this point where no, it's just mommy now, and okay, I've gotten rid of the babysitters, and I've even gotten rid of school, so she's being homeschooled, no, but it's not working. Okay, kill mommy, it's done, we gotta kill mommy. It's crazy to me that mom does say that it should have been earlier, but she didn't want to have any negative connotations about her or her husband or her family from other people. This is something that does come up a lot when you have children or teenagers that are acting up. Not just acting up, just they are undiagnosed or even diagnosed. This is really, like I said in the beginning, not a book that you read for fun. If you want to, it's like a psychological thriller, because you are in the head of this child that is a psychopath, and you're seeing the mom and dad being way more so the mom being traumatized because her own daughter tries to kill her multiple times. And what does that do to the mom? Like, something else that does need to be said. At the end, Hannah goes into inpatient, and that's what you need. That's not a failure. That is something that is you're working towards getting her at least acceptable in society and trying to diminish the violence. It's debatable if you can really get rid of it. I don't think there's enough scientific work on that, and I'm not going to pretend that I know, because it's really in depth and I don't read too much peer reviews on that type of subject. But even if you do it just like 15% decrease of violence in a psychopath, that's something. I mean, this is what you're faced with as parents with a child that is antisocial and probably has some other, mental illnesses, like maybe psychosis or maybe schizophrenia or bipolar. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can add on to even more issues in baby teeth. It's the very beginning, so they don't totally go into everything that she has, but she has a lot of stuff. Hannah has a lot of stuff. It's not that she's just a psychopath. She has other things as well, like delusions. I would probably say psychosis. That's really hard for parents to accept, and they blame themselves, and then people don't talk about, they don't like to talk about. But the reality is, when your child that has been terrorizing you and like everyone around you finally gets diagnosed and they go into inpatient, and they're safe now. Everyone is safe. You're not in fear of being harmed or even killed by your child, which is just a mind-altering issue that thankfully most people don't know. But for the people that do know it, that they're now their child's away from them, and everyone's safe. At the end of the book, the mom and dad are finally getting into a new routine, and they're not terrified anymore. And then Hannah calls and she says, I want to come back, and they're like, no, they don't say it to Hannah, but they say it to themselves. We don't want her back. We're finally getting to a somewhat normal baseline. They're paying for, the inpatient, they go into therapy, you get check-ins all the time, from the inpatient. So they are not abandoned. They're not abandoning her or the responsibilities for this child, but they don't want her back in the house. And people also took issue with that, but I can see why you might take issue with that. However, if you've been almost killed by your child like 3 times and have the realization that your child might or might not get better because she's a psychopath, you don't cure that. That is something that you will have for the rest of your life, and it's something that people, parents, family members, even friends of these people need to accept, and it's very difficult. And when you accept that, which is kind of, what happens at the end of the book, they don't want the child back. Especially, it's been only like a month or something since that child was put in inpatient, and of course she hates it because there's consequences for your actions, and you have a strict schedule, and she's not controlling the situation anymore. Like, she is the one being controlled. She wants to go back home, and she just doesn't like where she is. But tough cookie. I mean, you terrorized your mom and you tried to kill her multiple times. Yeah, I don't know. Even at 7 years old, the actions that she's done, the parents are really thinking at this point, safety, of course, but also, can you forgive a 7-year-old when they're like, let's say 27, and they're relatively stable, but you're still like, you're still a psychopath. Like, can you forgive your own child for trying to kill your wife or you 3 times? And also just being violent in general to get what you want from like dozens of people. that you've interacted with. I think it's up to the reader, which is also kind of like psychologically upsetting, that you, the reader, have to decide for yourself. Would you accept Hannah, if you were the mom or dad, with open arms? Would you forgive her? Would you bring her back early from the inpatient? Would you think that she's okay to be in society? That type of stuff is something, I don't know why, because this is a psychological thriller, so I would assume people would understand that, but that was something that was also brought up as an issue with the book, and I'm like, well, I mean, don't ask yourself that, just kind of end the book that. The one thing that I do kind of agree with just a little bit is the writing for Hannah. In certain situations, she's very, like, she's immature for age 7, but then she, in other situations, sounds like an adult, which at a certain point, the writer is an adult and she's trying to, you know, write a child that's a psychopath, so on average, most psychopaths have a high IQ, and they, even as children, the thing is they don't have a high emotionally intelligence, kind of, so sometimes they do fall back on being or on acting very immature for the age, and then they kind of like go and act as a 7-year-old would, and then they would act as, you know, maybe like a 20-year-old would in certain situations. That's like, but that's also an issue of other mental illnesses that need to be diagnosed. So, you know, I think that could be something that the writer did on purpose, especially when Hannah self-soothes with this, you know, ugly doll that she created. She thinks that the doll is alive, and she's talking to the doll, and the doll talks to her in self-soothing moments. I mean, that's more like a 4-year-old type of mentality, but is it, you know, is it immaturity, emotional immaturity, or could you count that as delusional and take it like a psychosis issue? That's something that was not discussed in the book, and I don't know if we can say about that, but that's something that could be a hint that she has more issues going on, and it's not even a clear cut, oh, she's a psychopath and that's it. You know, there's other things going on as well. So I think this book is more so lean towards people that know a little bit of psychology, or mainly I would say people that are interested or know more of the basics of sociopaths and psychopaths, and then also like kind of touching on other mental illnesses like a psychosis or delusion, something, you know. And I could maybe see she could have social anxiety as well. So if you have all that knowledge, the book is even more intriguing and more fascinating. I could see if you're just, you know, reading this book and you don't have the knowledge of the listed mental illnesses that I've described, you're like, I don't get it. And I think there's a lot of people that have that privilege where they've never met or they don't know that they've met a psychopath. They don't have any knowledge or personal experience with that, so they're like, I think this book sucks, 1 star, because it's not realistic and kids can't be violent like that. Which also a thing that, have you been around more than like one kid? Like, I think it's you don't know about mental illnesses and sociopaths, psychopaths, and you also don't know about kids. And also, I think just overall you don't know about human beings and how humans work. Honestly, if you think that this isn't something that would happen in real life, which I've seen like a couple of those on Goodreads, I'm like, you have a fantastic view of human beings. I don't know. Rude awakening when you encounter someone bad in your life. But that's a different story, isn't it? So, yeah, I did give this 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, I mentioned basically most of the spoilers in this book, so don't read the book if you don't like anything that I said, because that would be very triggering. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great psychologically thrilling reading day. Bye!